Right up to date and with the most up-to-date information stateside. It is our U.S. correspondent, Rich Reynolds. How you doing, Rich?
Hey, so something's been going on. There's an election. I didn't know about that. So I just
Okay.
just woke up out of a stupor. No, it has been a crazy morning and a crazy evening and across the USA and even here in Europe.
Really, what we need to know is what happened, I suppose. Trump's won. It's not quite happened in the way that everybody was expecting. It's looking pretty much like a landslide. Why?
Well, actually, you know what happened is if you even look at the polls, because every week for 9 months we were talking about polls, polls, polls. The polls kind of got it right for the most part. They had everything within a margin of error of 4%, and right now Trump is leading Harris because, of course, the ballots are still being chosen. And once California comes in and Hawaii and a lot of the West Coast states, which they're still counting now, it's going to be about 3.5, a little bit less than a 4% difference. The only problem is, or the only difference is, most people had it called for Harris and not for Trump. And just like he did in 2016, he defied the odds and kind of screwed up a little bit, screwed up the count, so to speak. Right now,
You're saying the polls had it the wrong way round, basically. That
the wrong way
3%
round, yeah.
lead
But
was actually Trump's.
Yeah, but it was really, really close. It just, for those people who were Democrats, it just did not turn out the way they wanted. And right now, the Electoral College count is Trump 276, Harris 223, and of course, as we've said every week, you need 270 to win. And that Pennsylvania vote that they were counting on the Harris side went for Trump. And then Michigan, it looks like Michigan they're still counting now, but is probably going to go for Trump. Wisconsin was a battleground state. It went for Trump. And he ended up with 71 million votes, which is 51%. Harris ended up with 47.5. At least that's how things are trending right now. The stock market likes it. The Dow Jones is up around 1,300 points. So there is that. As to why, there are a lot of different reasons.
Indeed. Kamala Harris yet to concede, or is that happening now? I can't see it at the moment.
No, I haven't seen anything about a concession. I do know from everything I've seen, and I've obviously been monitoring a lot of different U.S. sources. She's kind of hunkered down. She had I guess you could call it a celebration scheduled for this morning and decided not to hold one.
Everybody dispersed and she went home, apparently.
Yeah, she went home and she said, I'll talk to you later. I'll talk to you later. But, the way things played out, you kind of can't blame her. It was kind of a tough day.
What are we looking at for a final result?
As far as the final result, I don't know. Is
that final what we're seeing now? Those figures, or are we still going to see that change? The 223 to 279.
It's not suddenly going to change. There's no way it's going to change. All of the news, only one news operation called it early, and that of course was Fox News. They called it before everybody else. But all the other U.S. networks and newspapers were very, very conservative. They waited till the very last minute, and it's. I don't think I've ever eaten my words on anything like this, but I can't see it changing at all. It is going his way, and he will win with at least 276, maybe a few more.
Okay, he has claimed a magnificent victory, I think was the words that he was talking to when he spoke to his supporters. So how did this happen, Rich?
Well, first of all, let's give her a lot of credit because she had an impossible task. I mean, she's only been on the he's been campaigning basically for 4 years, and she jumped into the race and was handed the reins on this horse 3 months ago. And so she had a lot of work to do. She had to set up a campaign. She had to hire people, and of course, she didn't do this all by herself. But I thought she ran pretty close to a flawless campaign. And I know that kind of belies what eventually happened. But the fact is, she spoke to the right people. I thought her message was on point. She's a very appealing candidate. She worked this thing up until the very end. On the other side, Trump also, his message seemed to be all over the map, but there's something about him that people really like. So, at the end of the day, 58% of the voters disapproved of the job that Joe Biden has done. They didn't like his border policy. They didn't like what had happened in inflation, because no matter what, the economy is getting better and better and better, and people are making more and more money, and earning power is way up. But at the end of the day, from 4 years ago, people are spending a lot more money in the States than they were in 2020. So it's kind of hard to get over that.
I'm not sure everybody is yet, Rich, of course. It's still a bit of time to go before that filters down to perhaps some of those who really need it.
Yeah.
We're hearing that Kamala will address the nation from Howard University this afternoon.
Okay.
But yeah, so I guess they're frantically writing that speech. But why? We understand how, but why did it happen then? Were voters just not ready for a black African Asian president who's a female?
That is an interesting question, and that is something that one of the commentators I was watching pointed out. He said perhaps the time wasn't right for a black Indian woman who's in an interracial marriage. Is it a little bit too much for most Americans? Do we give people too much credit by saying, oh yeah, well she's got this interesting background and she's very empathetic, which I believe she is, but I think people get locked into that white male thing, about Obama aside. But the fact that, she was running against a guy who really flashed that whole macho persona. He also played the victim. And it's kind of weird that you're a macho guy, but you're a victim. But people saw him as an outlier. They saw him as, I'm just like you, even though he is a billionaire who lives in a tower with a gold toilet. Still saying, hey, I'm a victim. And people, all of these lawsuits that are up against me are politically motivated. Look at what they're doing to me, and that's the card he's been playing for 2 years. And I think people bought into it. People in general, whether it's Americans or Brits or Spaniards, a lot of people believe that they can't fight the man, that they're victims of these sorts of things. And he did a really nice job through aggression. I mean, you got to admit it. Wherever you went, he was there. He was at every rally, and he was making, 5 and 6 speeches a day, and he was on television all the time. You couldn't get away from him.
Well, these days, he is the man again. We mentioned pollsters there, though. The bookies seem to get it right. How come the pollsters don't?
Well, a lot of the pollsters did get right. The pollsters that absolutely got it right were Trump's pollsters. Everybody else said it was going to be, yeah, they said it was going to be really tight, but their guy was going to win. And it turns out they were right. And everybody else, especially the Harris pollsters, let's look at what happened in Iowa. About 3 days ago, a poll came out that said from the Des Moines Register, which is the newspaper of record for the state of Iowa, that it looked like Harris had a 5-point lead going into the election. Harris ended up losing by 11 points. That's a huge swing. They got that way wrong. And I think the reason is because of their sampling. A lot of people, and this happened in 2016, they're Trump supporters. They just don't like to talk about it. They just like to make out, well, could I vote for a woman? Yeah, that I could do that. That sounds great. I mean, it's something I would want to do. But when the rubber hits the road and they walk into that booth, they're going to vote for the macho guy who's a white male, and he's going to be more of the same. Despite all the chaos this guy is going to create, I think they believe that maybe he's changed a little bit. I don't know. If you're going to have a Republican president, and you're a Democrat, you'd like to have at least one of the two houses that you can control. That way there are some checks and balances. In this particular case, it's really a good bet that they're going to lose both the House and the Senate. But the House is up for grabs right now. In the Senate, which has 100 seats, The Republicans are leading 52 to 42. So that's 94. That means there are 6 seats that are up for grabs, but the 52 automatically gives them a majority, meaning they're going to be able to rule things as they see fit. In the House has 435 seats. Everybody runs every 2 years. In the Senate, as every American knows, you run every 6 years, and it's the dominant House. In the House of Representatives, there are 435 seats. They run every 2 years. So literally everybody in the House was running for re-election this year. The current numbers are the GOP, the Republican Party, has 198. They picked up 1 seat. Democrats are at 180. They've lost a seat. They need 218 for a majority. So things are looking, they can go either way. But right now, the smart money is on the Republicans holding on to that. So
I guess we're not going to see that situation then where you get things hung in the balance where things can't happen. It's happened a few times. Happened when Obama was president as well, where you couldn't pay for things like public services because there was no agreement on the budget. If one side or other has a majority, then these things won't happen. They'll go through, won't they?
That's exactly right. It's very similar to what happened. Obama had a split House and Senate, and he didn't control the House, and consequently, a lot of stuff ended up getting stalled. Any sort of idea that a Democrat had, Republicans were automatically against it, and frequently vice versa. But the way it stands now, Trump is, if he gets a majority in both houses, anything he wants to do is pretty much going to be railroaded through. And it's going to be a rough 2 years for the Democratic Party, no question about it.
This isn't just my question. It's the question that's been on a lot of media as well this morning. Will that mean then that he can pardon himself? I'm going to go on and ask about the Supreme Court and how that might be affected. But these situations that Donald Trump is facing, having had the conviction already, but facing other charges, can he just write all that off now?
That's a very good question. And in fact, there is no answer to that because it's never been attempted before. A lot of scholars have raised that question because he has hinted at the fact that he'd like to pardon himself from all of these things that he's facing, all of these lawsuits. And the fact is, nobody has ever asked to do it before. My guess is he's going to try to do it. My guess is at a certain point when he takes office in January, on January 20th, he may very easily go, I hereby pardon myself of all this. And what's going to happen is the only way he's going to be able to not be able to do that is if Congress drafts some sort of legislation that says you can't do that, or the Supreme Court says you can't do it. Unfortunately, he has the majority, and he'll have a majority in the House, he'll have a majority in the Senate, and the Supreme Court is heavily conservative, and they're probably going to allow him to do it. So I think that for me, the smart money is then, yes, he will try to pardon himself. Yes, he will get away with it this time.
But there's also the fact that he was convicted already. We've got a very upset listener who keeps messaging us saying, please stop saying he's a convicted felon. Well, we can't because that's absolutely the truth. So could he actually absolve himself of that, annul it, in fact?
He can. He can. A president has unlimited power when it comes to that. You could, I've never heard of anybody, and I'm sure it's happened in the past 248 years, but of a president pardoning somebody who had murdered somebody. But for the crimes that he's had, it's highly pardonable. I mean, there's no Joe Biden could pardon him if he wanted to. I mean, he's not going to do it, but I think it's entirely possible that he do it. It doesn't matter what the crime is. If the president pardons you, you're pardoned. It's done. It's off the books. It's completely wiped clean.
All right, 11 p.m. tonight. That's actually UK time because we saw the runner which said Harris will address the nation from Howard University this afternoon. I'm just checking on the time for that. That's actually midnight Spanish time. That speech is expected. That's quite a long time.
Yeah, it is. You can only imagine what she's feeling right now, and so I get it. It's sure her consideration is not for what's happening in Europe right now. It's how she's going to do this, because this could conceivably be the end of her political career. I don't know if she's where this is going to take her from now on. So it's going to be kind of interesting.
We'll come to that because I want to look at the Republicans first, of course, because they are the winners and they will be governing. What next, Rich?
Well, I mean, this victory is so huge in that what happened across the board. Once you really look at the numbers, he actually improved on virtually every district in the country that he was running in. So, in other words, he improved 90% of the counties in the entire country. So in other words, if he lost by 10% in 2020, he lost by 5% now. If he won by 20%, he ended up winning by 25% this time. So everything was amplified. Everything was kind of turned up to 11 for him. So he really has a mandate right now to do what he wants. Now, whether or not he's going to, jump aboard the crazy train and start doing nonsense, nobody really knows whether or not he's grown up. I tend to think that he had 4 years in Washington, and despite all the bravado, despite all the nonsense he tends to spew, he does kind of understand how government works. And he may try to jam a bunch of nonsense through, but is he going to put a 200% tax on goods coming into the country? I don't think anybody thinks that's actually going to happen.
Well, that was meant to be for China. For Europe, it was meant to be 20%.
I don't think that's going to happen either way.
Whether those come to fruition, we'll see. Markets are liking it, though. Look at that, 3.16% up. The Dow, the S&P 500, 1.99%, and the Nasdaq 2.35. Just going to have a quick check on the UK markets as well, which are not doing too badly, just marginally up. The FTSE 250. Already up, but all across Europe they're down. Nothing dramatic apart from here in Spain, 2.74%, but that's not unusual. So the markets seem to like it. They kind of liked him as a business president last time round. It was all right, wasn't it?
But it kind of did, it surprised me. But if you look at, there is some sort of an election day bounce that it happened in 2020, it happened in 16, it happened in 12. The markets automatically bounce. There are a lot of people that like Trump. There are a lot of people who don't. And so what happens is the market is, as everybody who plays the market knows, is very sensitive. It's very reflective of something that happens. And if it's kind of like somebody that if you look at them strangely, they're gonna overreact, and the market tends to do that. So the market is overreacting today. I wouldn't put it past the market to drop 1,300 points tomorrow. So up today, down tomorrow. I don't, nobody really knows. But one thing I do want to talk about before we move on too much, and it's about the Supreme Court, because this is really important. So what has happened here is that because the president is responsible for appointing people to the Supreme Court, which of course have to be approved by the Senate and the House, which, if you control both of them, that's pretty much a layup. The Supreme Court right now has 4 quite old members. They have John Roberts, who's 67, Sonia Sotomayor is 68, Samuel Alito is 74, Clarence Thomas is 74. And the thing is, if he could convince those 2 older justices, Alito and Thomas, who are both very, very conservative, he can appoint somebody who is in their 30s or 40s in there and will be conservative and will be on the court for the next 30 years. So he has a real chance of stacking this court for the next 30 years or so. And he already has 3 of his appointees on the court right now. So he will have 5 of the 9 justices will be his appointees, and for quite a few years. So this is going to be a very, very conservative Supreme Court.
Do you think that might have been what was on his mind already when he was saying that vote now, you won't have to vote again to America?
Boy, I'll tell you, that's the truth. And, the big question is on everybody's mind is why this happened. And I tend to think, and this was said by a couple of other commentators I heard this morning, that America is probably becoming a more conservative country than we previously thought. We thought, it's it's becoming very progressive. It's becoming more liberal. Everybody is becoming kind of woke. Everybody is more concerned about their fellow man than they are about, the economy and stuff like that. That didn't happen. All people care about the economy. 75% of the people that were surveyed, and I think it was an NBC survey, said they are in financial straits. 75%. Obviously a huge number, that people are really worried about paying their bills. People who are young, a lot of them voted for Trump because they felt, well, I'm never going to be able to afford a house, and they have financial problems. And so the economy is on everybody's mind, not necessarily being woke. That is a small thing. So I tend to think the country is swinging a lot more to the right than a lot of people thought, and he's just kind of a reflection of that.
You're saying a lot of people are swayed by mainstream media, and perhaps it's mainstream media that had it wrong about how woke the country was becoming, and indeed other countries around the world.
You know what? You posed that question to me this morning on text, and I have been thinking about it all day. And so thank you for that. And I don't know what the answer is. There are certain news operations that tilt to the left. There are a couple that tilt to the right. Most of them try to play down the middle. And as someone who has worked in the journalism business for most of his life, I know that journalists themselves are honest, hardworking people, and they try to play everything down the middle. Sometimes biases show. This whole thing about fake media, I don't quite understand. I've never known a journalist ever.
Okay, so we know that they're pretty much one way or the other. There are a couple that play it down the middle.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
no, right we leave that up to the politicians to make things up.
Yeah, but the point is, that you get to the point where are some of these news outlets kind of helping him win? That's your question, right?
Well, yes, and it's not just mainstream media, is it? Of course, because we have to talk about the influence that you get from social media and the like. There's got to be a big sway on what is going on the social media platforms. Like I said, we've been having a good old battle with a lady who just will not accept the fact that Donald Trump was convicted, even, let alone anything else, because I guess she perhaps only reads what she reads and doesn't, step outside of the comfort zone, despite the fact that we've told her, look at any site, whichever political sway, whichever way you want to look at it, he was still convicted. She won't have it. So there are people who only get their news from certain sources, and they may just be from like-minded people. So, it's I don't know how we deal with that. I wonder whether, I don't know. I'm sure whether the internet has as much of an impact to say on things as perhaps say, we saw in the Oppenheimer film, for instance. Could it be that big? I don't know.
Well, it has been huge. I mean, let's face it. We are all on social media. It doesn't matter whether you prefer Instagram over TikTok over Facebook. We're all on it all the time, and because it's mesmerizing. The way I put it is that there's a huge difference between what you like and what's true. It's okay if you like Trump because he's macho and you like the cut of his jib, you like the way he combs his hair, you like the way he puts on orange makeup. There's that. But it's another thing to say, well, he didn't cause the January 6th insurrection on the Capitol. He did. And they say you could look at him and say, well, he wasn't really convicted. He was, It's another thing to turn around and say, that's okay. I still like the guy. I get that. We all like people because we just, I have a phrase that I say all the time, which is you like who you like, and you don't have to explain to anybody why you like something. I mean, that's okay. But don't do it because you're turning around and saying he never did that. There is that. I think that a lot of what the Democrats, their problem was when the economy was proving to be the big thing, the Democrats were talking mostly about abortion. That was a big thing to them, and they kind of
both sides were though,
and they blew it with, and I believe they blew it with the whole border. I mean, they did leave 2.5 million people come in without a problem, and then they said, okay, now we'll fix it. Too late.
We've had some correspondence, Rich. I've mentioned the lady that was messaging us upset about the convictions. I don't know how she missed them, but anyway. But there's been quite a lot of remarks as well from some of our regulars. David, the scientist in Italy, saying, I don't know what happens next. Hope and pray for peace and wider peace. I'll carry on ignoring personalities, politics, media, and manipulating people, as most Americans apparently don't believe their main media.
You know, what I think
one other. I hope someone can tackle the drugs prices, homelessness, and leave the PNAC a bit. What he means there, the PNAC, that's the project for the next century, isn't it?
Yeah,
for the new American century, I think it stands for.
Yeah, for like Project 2025. I think that my hope is that, because everything is very cyclical, that when he was president back in 2016, the country did not go down the toilet. And I'm not defending him, but I'm saying we still rebounded. And by 2020, we still had a country standing, and we got through it. And, you know, right after that came the pandemic, but everything kind of survived and bounced back a little bit. And I don't think, you know, American history is presidential history has it that every 8 years, the country cleanses its palate, just as Britain did a couple of months ago. You know, you're conservative, and then you elect someone who's a little more liberal, and what happens is you get on your merry way. You make changes. It's the nature of the beast.
Mark has written, the whole world turned on its head last night. It was all about the economy in the end, abortion, immigration, unity, etc. All important, but the big subject was wanting more disposable income, and Kamala's focus should probably have been more on that. Just address the economy, stupid, he says, as some US guy once said. I really like her. I thought she came across really well in a short space of time, but I'm a European, so I just don't get what millions of US people can see in a guy like Trump.
No, I'm with him on that. I agree with him 100%. I think that there's something in him that people like, and I don't share that. There is something about him. People like the cut of his jib, and we have him for the next 4 years, and that's about it. You know, as for what's going to happen with Kamala from here on in, one only knows, because she is no longer the head of the Democratic Party.
Well, and we don't know what she's going to say later on, do we? So I guess we'll have to reflect on that next week. We'll be back in our usual Tuesday slot for mainland Spain. Many thanks for your insight, Rich. We'll let you get some sleep, because I don't know how much you've really had over the last 28 to 48 hours. But let's leave it with Quincy Jones, maestro of American music and titan of the American entertainment industry, influenced nearly every popular genre, produced landmark albums, earned 80 Grammy Award nominations, who died on Sunday at the age of 91. Quincy Jones and Paddy Austin to finish Razzmatazz, one of the true greats, Rich.
Yep. See you Tuesday.